Welcome back to our YouTube channel. We're going to teach you how to execute the sumo today. And guess what? This guy's really good at it. His name's Chris Bridgeford. So he's going to show you, and you're going to learn. Or you're not. We don't care. No, we do care. We want you to learn. Yeah. So stick around.
Let's do it.
Today, we're going to start straight from the moment you grab the bar all the way to locking out that sweet, sweet sumo. So take it away, buddy.
All right, so the first portion of the execution that we're going to go over today is the slack pull. So as Brian said, we covered everything up to grabbing the bar last week, and we'll touch on a few of those points just because they are still relevant when explaining everything. So we're in our stance, right? We don't have to go over any of that. We know where to tension, right? We have everything in the right position. We're going down to grab the bar. So the first thing I'm going to go over is how to pull slack, right? You hear a lot of people talking about this. A lot of people don't even really understand the purpose behind pulling slack. And basically, to put it simply, the purpose of pulling slack is to leverage your body weight against the bar. If we can subtract as much weight from that bar before it leaves the ground, we're going to make the lift that much easier. And that's essentially what we're doing when we pull slack out of the bar. So there is an order of events that an order of cueing that I like to go through when I pull slack for a sumo deadlift. In the last video, I referred to this as playing your cards and playing those cards in the right order at the right time. So, all right, we went through our whole setup and we're down and we're in position to grab the bar. So the first thing that we're going to do here when we talk about pulling slack is we're going to focus on tensioning our lats. And the way we're going to do that is using the cue of driving our shoulders down to our back pocket or depressing our scapula. So basically what that means here is when I come down to grab the bar, I'm going to focus on taking my shoulder and I'm going to try to push it down to my butt as much as I can. So after that, I'm going to focus on the intention of extending my T-spine. A big issue I see a lot when people pull slack is they come down here and they pull slack by retracting their shoulders, right? By pushing their shoulders up like this, and we don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do here instead kind of goes back to Brian's point last week where we imagine our arms are chains and they're tight the entire time. But what I'm trying to do here with intention of extending my T-spine is to get some more bend in this bar. I'm not doing it by retracting my shoulders. I'm doing it by
He's just moving his minute back from right here to right here is what's moving. Notice his hips are staying in the same spot. His low back's in the same spot. He's moving just specifically for this T-spine here. That's it.
While depressing my shoulders, while cueing myself to drive my shoulders to my back pocket, because that's going to ensure that I keep the bar close to my body when I'm actually executing the lift. An issue that we see when people don't do that is kind of, I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, we see people get pitched forward off the floor in a sumo deadlift, is when they are pulling slack and they are getting tension out of that bar, but their shoulder is forward and it's not packed down in the start position. So here, arms long, come down, I'm packing my shoulders down, I'm in tension of extending my T-spine, and then I'm going to focus on externally rotating and extending my shoulder. So that means that I'm going to focus on twisting my arms down like this. Ranson used a good cue earlier, thinking of trying to take your elbow. I'm out of breath.
So,
take it over.
Yeah, I'll take it over. So, a lot of times you'll hear someone say, hey, put your elbows in your back pockets. So, and that's a pretty good cue for, I would say, a good bit of people, but a lot of people are thinking of just bringing their elbows and pulling them back this way solely. Right. And they're not thinking of actually externally rotating at the shoulder. So one thing that's going to benefit a lot of people, I personally think, is thinking of not only just putting your elbow in your back pocket, but think of putting your elbow in your opposite back pocket. So think that there's like pretty much a string attached from this elbow to this glute here. So you're coming and you're trying to take this elbow this way. So you're externally rotating it and pulling back. That's going to create a lot of tension in the lats. and you're getting that external rotation, so it's locking everything down completely instead of just pulling backwards.
It's all about creating tension.
Yes.
Yeah, and each of these cues do something different for you. So
Yeah.
when we talk about driving our elbows to our back pockets, that is to depress the shoulder. When we talk about putting your elbow in the opposite pocket, that's to get us to externally rotate and extend our shoulder, because we can drive our scaps down and our shoulder can still be in a forward position and we can still be rounded over. But if we focus on extending our shoulder and externally rotating it, I'm going to be able to get that much more upright.
And this kind of goes back to the setup video where if your grip is too narrow, you're not able to actually
Yeah.
externally rotate that shoulder and get this chest out.
Yep. So if I was to set up like this, it doesn't matter if I externally rotate my shoulders here. When I go to lock out, I'm still not going to be able to open my chest and pull my shoulders back at lockout. So we want to have that shoulder width grip, and we want to focus on not only, like we said, driving our shoulder down to our back pocket, but driving that elbow to the opposite pocket so we can get the scapular depression and so we can get our chest open in our setup and get as upright as possible.
This is why he talks about playing your cards in the right order. Because think about it, if you have a problem with, maybe you do have that problem, and you might be looking at what's going on at the top when you need to be looking at what's going on at the bottom.
Yes.
So keep in mind, like you said, there's a sequence of events. So start your checklist off by starting at the bottom and seeing if something is leading to later on.
Yep. And this is my personal checklist. Some people might think about locking their hips in first before their upper body. This is how I teach it. Again, these are general guidelines. I don't speak in absolutes. This is a good place to start, and if you want to change things up from there because it works well for you that way, then do so. So, talking about slack pull, coming down, right? Driving our pits to pockets, intention of extending our T-spine and getting tall, making sure that we are twisting our elbows in, driving that, getting good external rotation here and extension to get more upright. Now we're gonna go into head position, all right? There's, depending on the way that you pull and individual, leverages, things like that, generally gonna see two head positions. We're gonna see somebody that's gonna have more of a head up position, and they're going to lead the lift. They're going to lead the lift with their head up, or we're going to see more of a neutral head position, where we're going to focus on driving our chin back. And there's a couple different ways you could word this, but I just tell people to tuck the chin while making sure that we keep our head neutral. All right, we don't want to
Show the over tucked real quick, the chin.
up.
No, the over.
Oh yeah,
Remember, not too tucked.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we're keeping our head neutral the whole time. We're just driving the chin straight back. I generally see people will overcompensate, and they'll either come back like this, Ransom likes to do that, or they'll bring their head down too much and they'll just tuck the chin. We're retracting the chin, right? We want to bring our chin straight back. So, depending on the style in which you pull, one of these is going to be more beneficial for you. So for me personally, on days where I'm able to create a much more upright position, leading the lift with my head up feels a lot better. I feel a lot more balanced, and I'm able to keep my center of mass directly over the bar more. On days where my hips are maybe feeling a little bit tighter and I'm feeling like my sumo is more of like a conventional style sumo, I'm not able to get nearly as upright, and I'm a little bit more hinge heavy, and I'm not driving into my quads as much. It feels a little bit more natural for me to keep my head in a neutral position and to drive my chin back. So it really depends on your individual leverages, and that's more so personal preference. So, but generally speaking, if you're able to get more upright, using a head up position might be better for you to use. If you're not a lifter that is able to get quite as upright, and you have a more bent over torso angle with your sumo pull, which is perfectly okay. Not everybody has to pull like Yuri Belkin. Not everybody has to make their sumo pull look exactly like mine. If you're a little bit more bent over, that's fine. So now,
I want to add to that real quick. I would say the majority of people, from what I've noticed, aren't able to get super upright.
yeah,
And so trying to lead with the head, like you said, is not a good idea. But what I have noticed with a lot of people is that, say you're here in your sumo pull and starting with more than the neutral head. Once you get to a point where you are more upright, you can change your head angle to where you are leading with it more, and it will help. Now, don't sit here and come completely back like that, of course, but once you get to a point like pretty much past the knees, or some people right at the knee, you can change your head position slightly to more upright, and it'd be easier for you to lock the lift out.
Because look at him, just like right here. As he comes up, and then he puts his head up, it's all straight up and down.
It stays neutral the entire time. And just to show like what it would look like if you were more of a bent over sumo puller and you're trying to get your head up, it's not gonna look natural. You see this, his neck is craned back here, right? It's not a natural position, and he's gonna feel really off balance just because this is not in line here. So we want to make sure. Yeah, so you see how much better that looks? Yep. And he has this more bent over position, if he focuses on keeping that head neutral and driving his chin back, it's gonna make it a lot easier to get better shoulder position here. It's gonna be a lot easier for him to open his chest and drive those shoulders back. Because the big thing we'll see when we have maybe a incorrect head position or a lack of tensioning through the lats and the shoulders, when we talk about hip shooting up in the sumo deadlift, it can either come from the hips or it can come from the shoulders. That's generally where we'll see that. So if we have somebody that doesn't have a correct head position or is not tensioning correctly through the lats and the shoulders, they'll go to pull off the floor, and the first thing that will happen is they'll pitch forward. The same thing too, if somebody has their hips set too low, the first thing that will happen when they go to pull is their hips will shoot up. So it's pretty easy to identify where it's coming from. If it's coming from the hips will shoot up first. If it's coming from the shoulders, you'll see the shoulders move first. So it's pretty easy to figure out where it's coming from and to fix it from there. So, all right, we've covered how to set your lats and upper body and pulling slack. We've talked about head position, and depending on what kind of sumo puller you are, which would be better for you. Now we're gonna go into bracing. So as we kind of talked a little bit about in the last video, I am not big on taking a huge breath for my sumo pull, and since it generally takes a little bit longer to set up a sumo pull, I like to take my breath in the bottom, and even then I only take a half breath. Biggest thing I focus on is setting my ribs, making sure my ribs are packed down, getting my torso as short and compact as possible, and getting my arms long and getting my lats wide. So getting more back in the setup here, but coming down to the bar, all right, I have my lats set. We come here, getting my torso compact, pushing in my obliques, and I take a little half breath, and then I pull.
So the next thing we're gonna go over is hip height. An issue that we'll see, like we kind of went over in the setup, is when people get too low, so we'll squat down to the bar. When you squat down to the bar, you're not really able to actually pull slack out of the bar. Next, you're not actually able to create torque at the hips, and this is a big aspect in actually being able to push the floor away as you initiate the pull.
And it's really uncomfortable.
So if he gets too low, he not only does not get any torque, as he goes to pull or push, his hips are going to shoot up first. And then he's pulling the weight with his back.
Yeah. So as we stated in the last video, if you're a lifter that generally has an issue, whether it's sumo or conventional, if you see your hips shooting up in your setup and you don't really have a good idea of where you should set your hips when you're going to initiate the pull, just pause the video of a previous sumo or conventional pull of where your hips rise to and when the bar is about to break the floor. And that's, generally speaking, that was probably a good starting point for you to set your hips. So I don't have that great of mobility, and it seems like I do based off of my training videos that people see, but I'm really just cheating as much as I possibly can. I have my hips set pretty high, and the reason why I'm able to create an upright position is by going back to what we talked about earlier, focusing on extending my T-spine and getting a lot of tension in my upper body to pull that bar into the position that I want it to get upright. I am not dropping my hips to get upright, all right? If you feel a ridiculous amount of strain in your groin and in your hips when you're trying to get upright, then you're likely missing a link. You're likely not playing the correct card at the right time up top when setting up. So
another thing we'll see when people set their hips too low is when they try to get close to the bar, and we'll talk about this later on in the video, they'll actually tuck their hips underneath them, or they'll try and scoop underneath.
Right. I can't really replicate that, but
So essentially when they sit up, if they're too low, they'll try and tuck under the bar. So they'll end up here scooped under rather than having their hips high and wedging themselves in.
So the next big thing that we're going to cover when we're talking about wedging into the bar is we want to make sure we're actually wedging into the bar, which means we want our hips to be as close to the bar as we possibly can without doing what Amber just talked about, where we compensate. We're not able to create that position or get into that position, so we compensate by rolling our pelvis underneath us and letting our lower back round, which is obviously not ideal. So a big thing I see when I see people wedging into the bar is they will just rock back onto their heels in their setup, which also ties back into the hip shooting up again. So what I mean by that is you have somebody who comes down here, they're tensioning in, and they go to pull, and they just rock back here. And they are completely behind the bar. Most of my body weight is behind the bar, and when I go to pull, a couple of things can happen. One, I can pitch forward again, or my hips will shoot up. But when I go to lock the weight out, I will be behind the bar, and I will not be able to get my hips through, and I'm simply going to compensate by leaning back, and what's going to happen here is I'm probably going to fall backwards. So when we're wedging into the bar, and we're doing all these things we already talked about, we want to make sure that my shoulder, bottom of my shoulder blade, or basically if you were watching from the side, the opening of my armpit right here, we want to ensure that that stays over the bar the entire time. That position never changes, all right? We want to make sure that this bar moves in as straight of a line as possible. So in order to do that, we need to make sure we stay over the bar. So if you were to watch this from the side, I'm here, all right, going through everything we talked about earlier. I come down, I hinge the bar, I set my grip, right? I start to depress my scaps, intention of extending my T-spine, and I start to externally rotate and extend my shoulder. As you see here, I am still directly over the bar, right? I didn't rock back, right? The position of my shoulder over the bar stayed the same the entire time, and I was able to push my hips in and get my hips closer to the bar, and that is what we call wedging into the bar. And from there, once we have that, the next thing we're going to focus on is cueing to actually complete the lift. So this is really, really simple. Same rules apply to the other lifts that we talked about. We want to make sure that we're maintaining good big toe pressure to ensure that we're getting a lot of help from our quads. Out of breath from that 5-second pause deadlift I just did. Nice. So yeah, we want to make sure that when we're in this setup, right, we're making sure we're maintaining good rooting, pushing our big toe into the floor, getting a lot of help from our quads off the floor. As I get in here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to cue myself to push the floor away from me, and I like to tell myself to push in the direction that my feet are pointing, right? And if I have my hips in a proper height here, when I go to lock my knees, my hips will be there to lock out simultaneously. So that is a consequence of having a good hip height, good lat tensioning, and everything else, right? When I go to lock my knees out, the hips are there to lock out as well. If you are somebody that over-exaggerates locking your knees first, and then trying to lock your hips out after, you're going to run into problems when you get to heavier weights, right? This is an issue I've had in the past where I will lock my knees really early, and I have, 800 plus on the bar.
He's already fallen forward.
Right? From here, if I have 800 pounds on the bar, the only thing that can get me to lock out this weight is to extend my upper back.
Which you should have already done.
Which I'm not going to be able to do with 800 pounds. So we want to make sure that when we go through here, we're going to pull. As soon as I lock my knees, my hips are there, right? I want to keep that bar as close to my body as possible. So now we can tie it all together. All right? All right, so down at the bar, all right, I start to focus on driving my shoulders to my back pocket. I have that intention of extending my T-spine ready to go. So as I start to bring my hips to the bar, I'm going to focus on extending my T-spine. I'm going to get tall here, and then I'm going to push the floor away.
See that simultaneous?
Right? So hips and knees and hips lock simultaneously. There's nothing over exaggerated with my head position. I keep my head neutral the entire time. And I drive my chin straight back at lockout, and I complete the lift beautifully. So, there you go.
Take a breather.
Yeah.
So how'd you like that? Was it good?
Yeah, I'm tired.
Tired?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm tired from looking at you.
Yeah, me too. But no, that was a lot of really, really good information. It was really loaded. So go ahead and take your time, pick it apart, and apply it to yourself.
Yeah.
Or if you're a conventional guy, like this guy, then come back next week and we'll show you how to execute the conventional deadlift. It's a lot less technical, but it's a lot more fun if you know what I mean. So thanks, guys.
Right.